Welcome to the Create a Life That Is Beautiful podcast, your go-to resource for personal development and coaching. I'm your host, Letitia Ringe, and I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I'm Letitia Ringe, your coach, and today we are talking about relationship advice for couples in 2025. This episode is for you if you are married or in a romantic relationship. And in today's episode, we'll be talking about how to both support and improve an existing relationship that you're in right now. I'm super excited to dive into this episode because in order to make decisions about our romantic relationships, we need to know how to both support and improve them. No matter what is happening in your romantic life right now, you must know how to support your relationship to thrive in every season of the relationship and in every season of the marriage if you're married. Now, a lot of us don't do this. We give no conscious attention to the way we support our relationships. We just go with the flow, hope it all works out. When it doesn't, we complain about it, and then we see that as a reason to leave. But what I want to let everyone know, which I hope you're all getting by now, is that all relationships need to be consciously and intentionally supported. And so in order to do that, we need to know, how do we actually support them? And that is what all of the Relate Higher series on this podcast is about: how to support relationships to thrive. Now, when you don't do this proactively, you get to a point where you actually need to improve the relationship because it's not thriving. And in fact, it's becoming a drain on your life and on your energy. And so you might be in a place where you're actually thinking, should I even be in this relationship? And in fact, many couples will choose to separate or ask themselves whether they wish to separate at the beginning of the year. So that's why this episode is perfectly timed for those of you who might be asking yourself this question. But like I tell every single client I work with who is thinking about leaving a relationship that they're in right now or ending a marriage, I tell them first, I highly recommend we go through a very intentional process that I move them through to improve your relationship. The reason we want to do that is because if you leave a relationship without actually giving it the support it needs to thrive, when you leave the relationship and learn how to support relationships to thrive, you will look back on that relationship, realize you didn't support it in the way it needed, and then you will always wonder, what if? What if I had have given it the support it needed to thrive? Would we have worked? Would the relationship have been successful? Would we have thrived together as a couple? And you will never know. And by that stage, because you've gone through the very challenging process of uncoupling, whether that's done consciously or unconsciously, there will be pain involved. And it is very likely that at least one of you in the relationship will not want to revisit the relationship and repair and rekindle the relationship to go through this process of improving the relationship and seeing whether it does work, because you've already gone through the painful process of separating. So I want to make sure that every one of you avoid this and first learn how to support a relationship to thrive. Implement this into your current relationship, whether it needs improvement right now or not. And then, and only then, once you've set your relationship up for success, if you still are wondering, is this the relationship to be in? Then you can start to actually move through that particular phase of the relationship cycle and make a decision. And in my next episode, I'll be speaking to that phase of the relationship cycle, which I call deciding whether to leave a relationship. Now, I also want to mention before we dive into today's episode that I have done a previous podcast episode 194, called Elevate a Relationship Consciously. And I highly recommend you go back and check that out, because I'm not going to go into the 5 steps I shared in that episode in this episode today. So you can make sure you listen to that episode. And I also want to let you know that the Relate Higher series I've done on the podcast, all about conscious romantic relationships and the 6 C's to being in a conscious relationship. The 6 C's are the 6 conscious relationship skills I highly recommend. They are also great episodes for you to go back to and listen to. And I'll make sure that I link the 194 episode as well as the first episode in that Relate Higher series to the show notes for this episode. Finally, before we dive into the episode, I want to make sure that if you have not already accessed my relationship bundle called Create Thriving Relationships Today, that you make sure you go ahead and access that free community resource right now. You'll enjoy a 75-minute masterclass, 20 self-reflection questions, and 3 embodiment exercises to help you identify what you need to work on in order to take your relationships to the next level across your life. You can download that at letitiaringe.com/thriving relationships. And for those of you who want my support, either as a couple or as an individual on any area of your romantic life, my conscious relationship coaching program is for you, and enrollment is now open for the rest of 2025. You can find all the details and submit an application to apply at letitiaringe.com/CRCP. So without further ado, let's dive into our next episode on this Relate Higher series, all about romantic relationships. And in this episode, relationship advice for couples in 2025. Welcome to Relate Higher, a podcast dedicated to providing the leading standard in conscious higher relating and to teaching you a conscious framework for all of your relationships. This is your go-to resource for developing meaningful, conscious relationships across your life. I'm your host, award-winning relationship coach and consultant and former family lawyer, Letitia Ringe. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so the first thing I want you all to know is that if you're in a place right now in your relationship where things are really good, it's really important for you to make sure that you are checking in and have a clear support process for your romantic relationship so that it stays good. And this is just about being proactive, because what tends to happen where problems arise is where we have a lack of awareness of an issue as it arises. When it's just a little issue, when we can give it that attention, find a solution, and it's not something that you've been holding on to for months or years, and now there's all this resentment, anger, frustration, and separation with your partner that you're holding on to and putting on your shoulders and carrying around, and it's this big weight in the relationship that you may or may not have spoken to your partner about. And so over time it becomes a big issue and then eventually becomes a source of conflict, which you then need to go through a specific process to repair and move on from. When you're being proactive in your relationship, you're actually looking for these little issues. You're looking for them and you're addressing them as they come up as little issues. And being proactive means that it doesn't end up in these big areas of conflict where you then need to add on top of solving that little issue a whole repair process on top of that, which can be really, really challenging. So supporting your relationship throughout the good times is crucial to supporting the relationship also through bad times. And if you're in a place in your relationship where you know it needs to improve, and it might be, you know, that there's maybe just room for improvement, or you know it needs a lot of improvement, because if it stays like this, I'm leaving the relationship. You need to know how to improve the relationship. And today's episode is giving you the tools to do that, whether you're supporting the relationship and it's good right now, whether you know it needs some improvement or there's room for improvement, or whether you know there absolutely has to be improvement or I'm going to be leaving this relationship. So in order to understand how to thrive in a romantic relationship, we need to understand why relationships end. And I've divided up why relationships end into 2 categories. The first I'm going to call personal, and the second I'm going to call relationship. The reasons that relationships end are not always about what's happening in the relationship itself. Often, they're because of what is happening within one or both people in the relationship. And so that's why I call this first category personal. And it's really, really important. And I bet as I read through the examples here, many of you will resonate with these examples. So let's begin with this personal category. So some of the reasons why we end relationships, why we don't feel like we're thriving, why we don't feel like we're supported to pursue our purpose and potential, why we don't feel turned on anymore in a relationship, as it relates to the personal issues that lead to these problems. The first example here is a lack of life fulfillment. Looking at yourself, if you honestly ask yourself, are you fulfilled across your life right now? If you can't say that you're fulfilled, why aren't you fulfilled? What needs your attention? What is not thriving? It's really important for both you and your partner to be intentionally asking yourself this question as you move throughout your life and your relationship together, because lack of fulfillment in other areas of life becomes sources of conflict and even separation and disconnection in your romantic life. If you're not feeling fulfilled with your work and you're not generating energy through the work you're doing, in fact, it's draining you, you're then bringing that drained energy into your romantic relationship. And you might be pulling on the relationship more to compensate. You might become overly focused on the relationship, and therefore little problems become big problems because that's all you're focused on. So it's really, really important that we look at our life as a whole and we take responsibility for where things aren't feeling fulfilled, and we work to solve those areas where we aren't feeling fulfilled so that we are not putting unnecessary pressure on our romantic relationship. The second example here is mental health. Most, if not all, of the couples and people who are in a relationship that I have supported through my relationship work, and those who are deciding whether to leave a relationship, every single example has had an untreated mental health issue. We will all confront mental health challenges in our life at some point. There will be multiple challenges, most likely. And in romantic relationships, when one or both of you are dealing with a mental health challenge, it can become a real weight on the relationship. First of all, if you're the person experiencing a mental health challenge, it can be really difficult to focus on anything else. And so the mental health challenge becomes like another person in the relationship almost that's taking up a lot of the attention. And secondly, you can feel unsupported in your mental health journey because when we have a mental health challenge, it is very isolating. It's a lonely experience. Often we think thoughts like, no one understands what I'm going through. And so this can cause disconnection in your relationship. Now, if you're the person who isn't experiencing a mental health challenge and so you're supporting your partner through a mental health challenge, you too will need to be supported through that journey. And often you're not supported. There's little awareness about the impact a mental health challenge has on the people you live with. And in romantic relationships, that's going to be your partner. It is incredibly challenging supporting someone who is going through a mental health challenge, especially if that person is not being professionally supported. So it is very, very difficult for both people in the relationship when there is a mental health challenge, and both people should be supported through that journey. Now, if you're experiencing the mental health challenge and you're not getting yourself professional support, you need to think about the impact that is having not only on you, but also your partner. And if you are supporting your partner through a mental health challenge and you are not getting yourself support, you need to think about not only the impact on you, but also your partner. We shouldn't know how to deal with these things on our own. That's why we get professional support. And as I've shared over on Instagram, I did a story on this recently. Before you say, well, I just can't afford to get support, I want to tell you that you're wrong. There are professionals out there able to support you with mental health at every price point. it's more likely that it feels vulnerable to get that help. Or it feels annoying that you need to maybe meet with multiple people before you find the right person to support you. I want to encourage you to do the hard work of dating multiple people to help you with your mental health and making sure you commit to working with someone on your mental health over at least a 6-month period. I want to encourage both of you to get support through that journey. It will improve your relationship. Otherwise, the unsupported mental health challenge on both ends will most likely become a problem between you in your relationship. Okay, third example here under the personal category. You might feel like you're stuck in your comfort zone in your relationship and it's really hard to leave it. This can look like things that aren't so positive, like gaining a lot of weight and you're really frustrated with yourself and you want to lose the weight. You want to get fit and healthy. You want to feel more attractive. You want more energy. But in the relationship, you're now in a habit where you're both not really supporting each other with that, or maybe just you aren't or your partner's not, and you feel stuck, like you can't get out of this rut you're in because the relationship becomes a comfort zone for all the habits we've created in that relationship. And whether they support us or not, whether your partner agrees with them or not, because they've been reinforced by the environment you've created together as a couple, it can feel so hard to change. This might look like you being less social or having just less range and variety across your life. Maybe it looks like not having much of a life outside of work or outside of the relationship. It's really, really important that if you feel like you're in a rut or you feel like you're stuck in this comfort zone and the relationship is not helping you to get out of that rut and that comfort zone because you're both reinforcing this environment that you know is not for your greater good, it's really important that you do the hard work to break out of that comfort zone. Stop blaming your partner and instead go and get yourself support. Work with a coach. Work with someone like me. This is exactly what we do. We help you get out of your comfort zone. And this becomes so important for your romantic relationship because the more you enable habits that are not serving you, the more resentful you grow towards the relationship, even though it's not really the relationship at fault here. You want to bring your best to the relationship so that you're thriving, and so therefore the relationship thrives. Okay, fourth example here is you might feel like you're losing yourself. It is very easy in a romantic relationship to focus all of your social attention on your partner or even hide behind the relationship when it comes to other relationships. A lot of men, for example, lose a lot of their friendships over time. And so the partner becomes their only emotional and social outlet, which can be a huge burden on your partner. If you feel like you're losing yourself, you don't know who you are anymore outside of the relationship, rather than blaming the relationship for that, like the comfort zone issue we just spoke about, go and get yourself support to move through a process to learn about who you are today. We all need to do this periodically throughout our life. I recommend you take yourself on a personal development journey every year to ask yourself those questions. Who am I? What is my purpose? What are my goals? What are my intentions? What are my values? I have a workbook that I use at the end or start of every single year called Create Your Beautiful Year, which takes you through 31 exercises, which have a list of different journal prompts and exercises to work your way through in order to do this. You can find that at letitiaringe.com/shop if you'd like my version. And this is a really important process to be doing regularly so that you don't lose yourself. And you can also work with coaches, people like me, who will also help you to build your awareness of who you are. And so it's important to do this not only for yourself, so that you're thriving as an individual, but also so that the relationship thrives. Now, the final example I have here under the personal category is challenging events. So there may be events or even just events that take up a lot of your time and attention. And so you might be going through something in another area of your life that's causing either a lot of stress or that just needs a lot of your attention. And so maybe the relationship is suffering at the moment because that particular event or area of your life needs more attention. It's really important, if you're going through something like that, that you recognize, hey, this is temporary, hopefully, and you're able to acknowledge and discuss the impact of that event or chapter in your life. And also, you're able to put appropriate boundaries around that event or that chapter so that your romantic relationship is also being given the love and attention it needs. This could look like just having conversations with your partner about it, but also having the self-awareness to look at the impact of this event or this area on you and your available energy, and also how that then impacts the relationship. So as we can see from all of these examples, none of these examples have anything to do with the relationship itself, but they all impact your relationship with your romantic partner. It is really, really important to always look at our side of the street, to have a look at, are my personal matters actually what is impacting the relationship, or what is impacting my relationship, and to take responsibility for your side of the street and supporting your side of the street and the energy you have to bring to the relationship first. Then we have a look at the relationship itself. This is the second category. Now, in order to support and improve a relationship, we want to look at these things. First things first is we often expect the same things to work in our relationship. Usually, these are the things that worked when we first started in the relationship together. And now we're a year, years, a decade, decades into the relationship, and we're comparing our relationship to when we first got together. I know something I spoke about in Elevate a Relationship Consciously, episode 194, was how at the beginning of a relationship, because it's new, we have so much more consciousness in the relationship. We're more present. And so a lot of our attention is in the relationship and everything feels heightened. But then as we continue in the relationship, what naturally happens is we revert to our unconscious. So initially in the relationship, there's a lot of habits and patterns and ways of relating between us that are established. And unless we slow down to, one, do the uncomfortable work of actually asking each other what our needs and desires are, and, is this really working for you? Is it not? Often we overlook the things that maybe aren't working, and then we lose that opportunity to talk about them in the relationship, and then they just become a habit. And also, we simply change as people throughout the years we spend together. And so expecting the same things to work that worked at the beginning of the relationship, which may not have actually been set up to make us thrive, and then expecting those same things to work in the relationship years on, that sets you up to not have a successful, thriving relationship. You need a process that causes both of you to check in on what is needed in the relationship now. And that's why I created my conscious relationship process and container, which gives you a process to follow month on month in your relationship in order to check in on what is needed in the relationship and in order to implement conscious relationship skills proactively. If you want to know more about the conscious relationship process, you can put your name on the wait list at letitiaringe.com/the conscious relationship. That program, which is a course, will be opening up once a year. I expect to be opening up that program next in September. So that is a problem. Secondly, protective patterns and triggers that show up in relationships. Did you know that unconsciously we all are attracted to people who remind us of the good and the bad aspects of our parents or caregivers? So most of the pain points between you and your partner are actually related to pain points you experience with your parents and or caregivers as a child, and unconsciously you're looking to resolve them. But usually the way we respond to triggers is they become issues between us in our relationships. And on top of that, we have protective patterns, which are ways we get our needs met that lead to disconnection in our relationships. As a child, they were the best strategies we could come up with in the environment we grew up in order to get certain needs met, but they come with a cost, and that cost in a romantic relationship is usually some form of disconnection. So in a romantic relationship, when you have needs and desires that are not being met, it is usually because one of your protective patterns, one of your protective strategies, in other words, is the very thing blocking you from having that need or desire from being met. And so you're in this habit and way of relating in your relationship, and it feels like nothing you do is getting this particular need or desire met. And often it's because of your own protective pattern and also the triggers between you and your partner. So this is really, really important to pay attention to and to start shifting in the way you and your partner relate with each other. And this is a huge part of the work I do with couples. Okay, another example under the relationship category is resentment and anger. When you hold any anger, even frustration or resentment towards your partner, and it has not been processed and dealt with, you carry that with you throughout your relationship. It's like a big dark cloud or a heavy weight just waiting to be triggered. And this is carried with you everywhere in your relationship. You need to have ways to process and express that resentment, frustration, and anger periodically so that it is proactively being dealt with rather than being buried, which then later leads to huge conflict between you and your partner, and it's just slowly creating disconnection between you. Now, in my conscious relationship process, this is a part of what we do so that you're proactively clearing this out month on month so that you don't become someone just about to implode, and so that you healthily know how to deal with these heavy emotions. Another example here are your needs and desires. Often we don't even know what we need and desire, or your needs and desires, the things you think you need and desire, are actually coming from a wound, from a protective pattern, from a trigger, or from your own personal matters. And so once we clear up these things, then you actually are able to get clear on what truly you need and desire. It is important to be tapping into what you need and desire regularly so that you can understand when things change, which they will, so that you can actually meet those changing needs and desires. And so you set the relationship up to be able to thrive over the long term. Over the long term does not mean implementing certain things and then expecting that they will work for the rest of your relationship. It's about the ongoing awareness as to what is needed and what you desire, and then being able to meet those needs and desires collaboratively together throughout your relationship. Another example under the relationship category is communication. Many couples simply are not communicating in a conscious way, and therefore that leads to further disconnection between you. Learning communication skills for relationships is really important. And that's why also in the conscious relationship process that I've created, I teach you communication strategies to use month on month in your relationship in order to get better at communicating as a couple. The second last example I have here is connection, sex, and intimacy. This is a really important area of your relationship, and typically it is vulnerable, and we don't share with our partner what our needs and desires are here, or we don't communicate it in a way where they're actually able to understand, or we don't understand truly what our needs and desires are here, and so we're not even in a position to communicate them. We also don't know how to meet hearing a partner's truth without reacting. And so when we react, we often shut our partner down because they see us react and they don't want to continue because they don't feel accepted. And then therefore, we're not actually honest with one another. So this is about communication again, but it's also about connection. Because if you don't feel like you can be seen by your partner, often it's because you actually are not allowing yourself to be seen. So part of what we need to do is develop our capacity for awareness and truth in a relationship. Not because we need to accept that, okay, that's their need and desire, so I need to meet that. It's about creating spaces where both of you are able to be fully seen and heard, so that you feel seen and heard in your relationship and therefore meaningfully connected. Whether and what you do with that information really doesn't matter. What matters is that it's expressed. And if you don't have the capacity to meet truth without reacting, it's very, very likely that either you and or your partner are withholding truths and then therefore not feeling connected. And this affects sex and intimacy, obviously, because sex and intimacy is really a microcosm of everything else happening in the relationship. You could even see it as a macrocosm of everything happening in the relationship. If you're not feeling connected in your sex lives together, it's likely that you're not feeling that in the rest of your relationship. If you're not feeling connected outside of the bedroom, it's likely showing up in your sex lives together as well. So connection, sex, and intimacy is a really, really, really important area of our relationship. And it's really, 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 really important to give it love and attention. It's really important to have great communication skills in order to support connection, sex, and intimacy. And it's also an area where we need to continually check in with ourselves and one another as to what our needs and desires are there, and have room to explore our connection and sex and intimacy over time and the ways that our needs and desires evolve there. Okay, another category is the way we manage conflict. Typically, we see conflict as terrible, which we avoid it consciously and unconsciously. And when it comes up, we make it way worse than it needs to be. Now, we make it worse because, like I mentioned at the top of this episode, we turn little problems into big problems through not checking in and looking for problems and solving them early on. We also create conflict because we don't know how to communicate with one another in an effective way. And we also create conflict that is a really negative point of reference for us because we also see conflict as really bad. So when it comes up, we get stuck in protective patterns where we respond to conflict from a triggered, dysregulated place, and then we are in a stress response. And it means that we then create this reference point that conflict is bad things happen whenever there's conflict. And so this leads to withholding truth, which leads to disconnection, which leads to problems in the relationship. So it becomes this really vicious cycle. And so some of the work I do with my clients is helping them to learn how to clear resentment and anger proactively, as well as obviously learning the communication skills that are needed to mitigate conflict, and also creating positive reference points and strategies for dealing with conflict, so that when conflict comes up, you're not making it a bigger deal than it needs to be. It's just normal. We're not all meant to be on the same page all the time. We're meant to have disagreements. Conflict is healthy, and we just need to know how to have a better relationship with conflict and how to get our mind and bodies not shutting down during a conflict. And so there are very specific skills and strategies you can learn for that. And that's something I also teach in the conscious relationship. And obviously this is a lot of the work that I do in my conscious relationship coaching program with couples and also individuals who are alone working on their relationship. So, as we can see, when it comes to supporting or improving a romantic relationship, we really need to be looking holistically at our romantic relationships through these two categories. We need to first look at our side of the street and have a look at personally what might be impacting the relationship, whether it's intentional or not. And then we also need to be looking at the relationship itself and how we're showing up in the relationship as a couple, and have a look at these things that are inevitably impacting our relationship and make sure we're supporting each of these areas within our relationship so that we're able to thrive as a couple. So to be able to understand what your relationship needs right now in order to support it, in order to improve it, whether it needs a lot of improvement or just a little improvement, Whether you see opportunity for improvement or not, remember that all challenges in a relationship are really just opportunities for better connection. So it's not about having no challenges in a relationship. That doesn't mean you have a better relationship. It is about the way you deal with challenges, the way you deal with need for improvement. So I've got some journal questions to leave you with for today's episode that will help you start to notice where those challenges and opportunities might be for you. And I want to make sure that all of you know, if you would like to really improve your relationship and learn how to support it in the best way possible, this is the work that I do with my clients in my conscious relationship coaching program. We'll be looking at personally and within the relationship what is needed for you, your partner, and the relationship to thrive. You can do the conscious relationship coaching program on your own, or you can do it with your partner. And together over 6 months, I take you through an intentional journey and a bespoke coaching process that has been created just for you to help you improve your relationship, to help you set yourselves up for success, to help you thrive as a couple, to help you thrive as individuals, to help you know what is needed in a relationship in order to thrive, and to set you up with the conscious relationship skills, process, and container that will support you to do that. If you want to know more about the Conscious Relationship Coaching Program and you'd like to apply, head to letitiaringe.com/CRCP. And a final reminder that if you haven't yet downloaded Create Thriving Relationships today, I also recommend you do that right now. You can do that at letitiaringe.com/thriving relationships and go through the exercises that I've given you there, as they're going to help reveal some of your protective patterns, your triggers when it comes to conflict, what is making conflict worse. And it's also going to help you create your own personal roadmap for how to improve your relationships. Okay, now let me give you some journal prompts to end today's episode. First prompt is, what do I need to thrive in this relationship right now? Second question, do I feel any anger, frustration, or resentment towards my partner? Third question, what do I desire that is currently not being expressed or met? Make sure you also think about sex and intimacy here. Fourth question, how comfortable do I feel acknowledging and communicating needs and desires with my partner? Now, the part of this question where I say, how do I feel acknowledging my needs and desires, is about acknowledging those needs and desires with yourself. Okay, sometimes we don't do that, so therefore we cannot communicate it, right? So you need to understand if that's something you've got a problem with, because that's something that needs to be worked on. And then secondly, how do I feel communicating those needs and desires with my partner? Fifth question, how good am I at receiving my partner's needs and desires without reacting? Remember before I was talking about we need to develop our capacity to meet truth, to meet what our partner or ourselves want to share without judging, without responding, without reacting, so that we can really hear and see them and therefore feel meaningfully connected to one another. This is what I'm talking about. How good am I at receiving my partner's needs and desires without reacting? And final question, how fulfilled do I feel across my life right now? These questions and your answers will help you reveal what your opportunities are to improve and support your romantic relationship right now. And these are questions I would make sure I'm asking myself and also asking my partner regularly, so that you can be equipped with the information you need to lead and support your relationship and to be more proactive, rather than having these become issues that become big sources of conflict over time. All right, my beautiful friends, I'm going to end today's episode here. I hope you found this really helpful. I'd love to hear what has resonated for you from this episode. Come and share with me over on Instagram at Letitia Ringe. And if you haven't yet left a review for the podcast, your 5-star reviews and your personal comments about what you love about the podcast really help other people to, first of all, see the podcast and find it, and secondly, to understand how the podcast can help them. I would really appreciate it if you haven't done that already, to go and leave a 5-star review, as well as your words on why this podcast is a podcast that you listen to so that we can support other people also having this work, which supports all of us as humans to evolve and to experience better relationships across our world. Okay, everyone, I'll talk to you later. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to the Create a Life That Is Beautiful podcast, your go-to resource for personal development and coaching. To deepen your learning and practice, make sure you're subscribed to receive our community newsletter. Subscribe at letitiaringe.com/newsletter. And if you haven't yet left a 5-star review for the podcast, we ask that you please do that now so that this podcast can reach other listeners who also want to join us in creating a life that is beautiful.